Mahama has finally accepted that Ghana is not a safe country to visit. By acknowledging the US travel advisory and accepting 14 armored cars from Western powers to fight terrorism, President John Dramani Mahama has unintentionally stepped into a carefully laid trap, one designed to undermine his Pan-African stance and fracture his growing alliance with Captain Ibrahim Traoré of Burkina Faso. What may seem like a harmless donation of military equipment is, in truth, a calculated move by Europe and its allies to destabilize Ghana's sovereignty and send a message to the rest of Africa. Pan-African unity will not be tolerated. Ghana AI News is here to reveal the deeper truth, the hidden motive behind this sudden wave of Western attention. This isn't just about Ghana, it's about silencing a movement. And in this report, we uncover how Western powers are playing a dangerous game, one meant to divide, discredit, and derail Africa's path to true independence. In a world where diplomacy is often a stage and truth is hidden behind veils of polished statements, something dangerous is unfolding in West Africa. And Ghana, once the proud home of Kwame Nkrumah's revolutionary dreams, is once again on the front line of a silent war. A war of influence, a war of resources, a war where travel advisories are weapons and armored cars arrive not as gifts, but as tests of loyalty. Recently, President John Dramani Mahama confirmed what many feared and what the United States had boldly declared through its travel advisory. Ghana, according to the Western narrative, is no longer a safe destination for travelers, investors, or tourists. This admission, though diplomatic on the surface, was like a silent gunshot, shocking, alarming, and revealing. But why now? Why would Mahama, just months into a presidency that rekindled hope for Pan-Africanism, validate a statement that could scare investors, destabilize tourism, and cripple confidence in the Ghanaian economy? A travel advisory from a superpower like the United States is a coded message, a way to discredit leadership, disrupt economies, and shake investor trust. And President Mahama, in acknowledging this advisory, was forced into a corner. Deny it, and he would appear reckless. Accept it, and he would validate Western fears, legitimizing the narrative that Ghana is unstable. But this was no coincidence. This was a trap, a carefully designed geopolitical snare with consequences far beyond what meets the eye. The Traoré factor. Why Mahama's inauguration shook the West. The warning signs were there. From the very moment Mahama extended an open invitation to Captain Ibrahim Traoré, the revolutionary leader of Burkina Faso, to attend his presidential inauguration, alarm bells went off in Western embassies across Accra and Washington. Why? Because Traoré represents everything the West fears: defiance, youth, and Pan-African solidarity. A man who dared to kick out French forces, nationalize natural resources, and speak directly to the hearts of African youth yearning for sovereignty. By bringing Traoré to Ghana, Mahama wasn't just being diplomatic. He was sending a message of unity, a message that Ghana may rise again, not as a puppet, but as a leader in African liberation. This symbolic act set off a chain reaction. Suddenly, Ghana was no longer safe. Not because of terrorism, but because of ideology. The very idea of a Ghana aligned with Burkina Faso's revolutionary spirit was a threat to Western interests built on centuries of exploitation. The gold gambit, kicking foreigners out of the market. Then came the second blow, the true economic shockwave. Ghana banned all foreign entities from participating in its local gold trade, giving exclusive rights to the newly formed Ghana Gold Board, Gold BOD. This wasn't just a policy decision, it was a revolution. Gold is Ghana's lifeblood. The country stands as Africa's largest gold producer and the 6th globally. Yet, for decades, this golden river flowed not into the hands of Ghanaians, but into the vaults of foreign corporations, middlemen and exploiters who used backdoor deals to drain the nation's wealth. Mahama's move was clear: reclaim the gold, reclaim the dignity, shut the gates. The ban, which gave foreigners until April 30th, 2025 to exit the market, sent shockwaves through London, Paris and Washington. Billions in quiet profits were now threatened. And this was not a matter of market efficiency. This was a declaration of independence. The West understood the implications. Ghana was now acting in its own interest, and that was unacceptable. The colonial masters and the tricks of disguise, a nation caught in a silent siege. In every generation, Africa is handed a new mask, polished, smiling, seemingly benevolent, but behind each mask lies the same face of manipulation. The Western colonial playbook, though dressed in the silk of diplomacy and modernity, remains untouched at its core. What has evolved is not its intention, but its tactics. Yesterday they brought muskets and missionaries. Today they bring bank loans and development partners. Once they planted flags. Now they plant military bases, travel advisories, and advisory boards filled with economic hitmen in designer suits. And as we marvel at their evolution, we fail to see that our chains have only changed form. In recent times, President John Dramani Mahama, whether intentionally or under duress, has begun to hint at this truth. He has dared to say what most dare only whisper. He has drawn attention to the shifting shadows of modern colonialism, a brave but dangerous act. For in this age, speaking out is not met with direct assassination, but with character sabotage, policy sabotage, economic starvation, and political isolation. This is no longer just a Ghanaian issue, it is an African one. And it is time the youth, the elders, and the guardians of our future awaken to the real war. A war of perception, of contracts, of conditional aid, and of silent domination. The deception behind diplomacy, how neo-colonialism evolves. Imagine a man who breaks into your house wearing a mask. You chase him away. Years later he returns, this time in a fine suit, offering help to renovate your home. You let him in. Slowly, he takes control of your kitchen, your bedroom, and your finances, all in the name of support. This is the story of Western neo-colonialism. Instead of colonial governors, we now have NGOs with sweet slogans. Instead of brutal force, we have the International Monetary Fund, IMF, which imposes austerity programs that starve our hospitals and schools. Instead of missionaries, we now have global peace missions whose aim is less about protection and more about infiltration. President Mahama, in subtle tones and veiled references, has begun to speak of this. In his forums, he has exposed how Africa's development partners use debt as a leash and diplomacy as a dagger. Mahama spoke of a system that smiles with one hand while extracting with the other. Of contracts so complex, they confuse even seasoned economists. And trade deals so lopsided that a nation ends up poorer after signing them. The armored car trap, when gifts become shackles. As if on cue, just days after the advisory, the United States and allies offered Ghana 14 armored vehicles, valued at over $5 million. Framed as a donation to bolster counter-terrorism, this gift was anything but innocent. It was a masterstroke of modern colonialism, a poisoned chalice disguised as aid. Here stood Mahama, a leader of a proud nation, forced into an impossible corner. Refuse the vehicles? That would be spun into recklessness. Media outlets would brand him unfit to govern in a time of terrorism. The opposition would scream incompetence. Investors would retreat. The nation's image would plummet. Accept them? That too came with a cost. It would alienate Pan-African allies like Captain Ibrahim Traoré of Burkina Faso. It would raise doubts among Ghana's radical youth. It would look like betrayal, a return to dependency, to obedience, to accepting crumbs dressed as cooperation. Mahama accepted the vehicles, but not the narrative. He played the long game, he bought time. And yet, the trap had been laid and its damage quietly done. This is the game of neo-colonialism. They build a scenario where every option hurts you. Then they sit back and call it your decision. Africa's real enemy, division by design. Let us be clear. The ultimate goal of these manipulations is not Mahama. It is not even Ghana. It is African unity. The colonial powers have long understood that a united West Africa, speaking with one voice, trading in one currency, and defending one border, would be unstoppable. Such a union would end the IMF's relevance. It would make military bases redundant. It would challenge the global gold markets. It would liberate the continent, not just symbolically, but economically. So they sow division. They fund opposing factions. They whisper of terrorist threats from neighboring nations. They frame revolutions like that of Traoré as dangerous, not liberating. They create the illusion of spillover threats from Burkina Faso, Mali, and Guinea. And they turn brothers into suspects, neighbors into rivals. The oldest strategy in war is to divide. In Africa, it's not just a tactic, it's a religion for those who profit from our fragmentation. The debt noose and the silence of the brave. Why then do our leaders remain silent? Why do they accept these traps, these vehicles, these contracts? Why do they speak in riddles, in caution, instead of the roaring truth? The answer is simple. Debt. Ghana owes billions, debt inherited from decades of bad deals, conditional loans, and resource-backed bonds that benefit only a few. To speak freely is to risk default. To resist is to risk sanctions. To fight back is to invite political intervention. And those who dared, Thomas Sankara, Patrice Lumumba, Muammar Gaddafi, paid with their lives. Today's leaders face a more subtle death. Media assassinations, character defamation, currency collapse, and elections manipulated through foreign election observers with secret orders. Even the brave must tread carefully when the battlefield is mined with dollars. Should we blame Mahama? No, not entirely. Mahama is not the architect of the trap. He is its latest occupant. He inherited a system of dependency so deep that defiance almost guarantees failure. Yet he has shown signs of awakening, signs of resistance, signs that he remembers the fire of Nkrumah and the lessons of Pan-Africanism. He could have said nothing about gold. He could have silently obeyed the travel advisory. He could have praised the armored vehicles as saviors. But he didn't. He left room for questioning. He allowed doubt. He created space for conversations like this one. That is not cowardice. That is the slow birth of courage. And still, we must demand more. We must not forget that our leaders are not just managers of nations, but guardians of destiny. We must hold them to a higher standard, one not defined by elections, but by history. The real battlefield, mind, media, and minerals. As we examine these events, we must redefine the concept of war. War is no longer fought on battlefields. It is fought in newsrooms, in boardrooms, and in trade negotiations. The media is the new artillery. They can destroy a nation's image in a week, making it unattractive to investors. Debt is the new chain. A country with no economic freedom has no political freedom. NGOs are the new spies. Under the cover of helping, they gather intelligence, sway public opinion, and report back to embassies. Elections are the new colonies. Funded, influenced, and controlled by those who wish to pick winners that serve their interests. This is the reality our youth must understand. The next revolution will not start with guns. It will start with knowledge. When will Africa be free? Not when the IMF forgives our debt. Not when France pulls out its troops. Not when USAID builds another school. Africa will only be free when its people know they are still colonized. When we stop celebrating foreign gifts and start demanding justice. When we stop praising development partners and start building independent institutions. When we stop accepting loans and start reclaiming our gold, our oil, our stories. We owe it to Sankara, who rode a bicycle as president to show humility. We owe it to Gaddafi, who envisioned a united Africa with one army and one currency. We owe it to Lumumba, whose only sin was loving his people too openly. We owe it to the unborn child in Tamale, in Kumasi, in Cape Coast, who deserves to grow up in a Ghana not painted unsafe by outsiders, but proud, independent, and whole. The war beneath the silence. This is not just Mahama's battle. It is Ghana's crucible, Africa's test. If we fail to understand the tricks of disguise, we will applaud our own chains. If we fail to speak, we will lose the language of resistance. If we wait for others to define our freedom, we will die waiting. The colonial masters are still here, dressed in suits, smiling in embassies, shaking hands with presidents, writing reports in glass towers. But so too is the spirit of Nkrumah, of Sankara, of the ancestors who remember. Let us rise, not in violence, but in truth. Let us resist, not with rage, but with vision. And let us remember, in this silent war, awareness is our revolution. As we uncover these hidden agendas and decode the manipulative strategies of the colonial masters, one truth becomes clear. Africa's liberation will never be handed to us. It must be claimed with courage, unity, and awareness. Ghana AI News is committed to exposing the truths they don't want you to hear. The truths buried beneath diplomatic smiles and foreign aid. If you believe in unfiltered truth, in defending the spirit of Nkrumah, Sankara, and Traoré, then this is your home. Subscribe to Ghana AI News and stand with the movement that refuses to be silenced. Together, we'll shine a light where they hoped only shadows would remain.